My Lords, I rise to speak to my amendment number 14. Firstly, apologies that I was away for the second reading. I confess that I probably have made a rather frustrated and angry speech at the limitations of the bill and the waste of a chance to end free leasehold once and for all. But I come here today in a more conciliatory mood with, I hope, a constructive proposal to create a sunset clause on all new leasehold flats that allows government 5 years to resolve any outstanding issues for present leaseholders. But also, because of a time limit, there becomes light at the end of the tunnel, and all the rhetoric from government and opposition condemning leasehold as a feudal, unfair tenure can be turned into a concrete outcome with no room for broken promises. There is nothing unreasonable or radical about the amendment. The Conservative Party's own 2019 manifesto promised to enact a ban on the sale of new leasehold homes, and note the wording was homes, not houses, and the majority of leasehold homes are flats. As Baroness Pinnock has pointed out, 70% of them, in fact. And we know that it is precisely in relation to flats where the real abuse occurs, where the real money is made by third parties in exploitative extraction, and where the majority are denied control of their own finances and lives, and where this scandal lies. What's more, the number of leasehold flats is increasing exponentially, whereas the proportion of new build houses sold as leasehold is falling dramatically, from a 15% high in 2016 to a meagre 1% of all leaseholds in December 2022. Yet this bill avoids the main problem, and I'm hoping that this amendment gives us a way out, and that now is the time to do it, because banning new leasehold houses is not enough, and does not, in my opinion, despite what Baroness Scott assured us, it does not uphold the manifesto commitment. This amendment, therefore, allows the government to honour its promise, but without doing it in a rush. Not to be partisan, I was delighted when the Shadow Housing Minister, Matthew Pennycock, pledged to scrap leasehold tenure within the first 100 days in office, but this now appears to have been slightly rescinded or fudged. So this is an amendment for all sides to ensure that there's cross-party consensus that we will absolutely name the date by which leasehold will have gone. What Michael Gove, the Secretary of State, has called an indefensible system tenure. And that's what, as far as I can see, cross-party everyone agrees with. And if not now, when? This is the first piece of legislation tackling leasehold tenure for new and existing homes in 22 years outside of building safety. 22 years. Another opportunity to move against this iniquitous regime may not come round anytime soon. It might take another 22 years. And I'm keen to learn the lessons of history, because back in 1995, the late Frank Dobson, then Shadow Secretary for the Environment, and Nick Rainsford, the Shadow Secretary for Housing, brought out an excellent pamphlet entitled The End of Feudalism, Labour's New Leasehold Reform Programme. It noted that, quote, over recent decades, the weakness and injustices inherent in the British leasehold system have become increasingly highlighted. But reform has been a long time coming. It was then promised that reform would come under that government, but sadly reform has been even longer time coming, because despite a promise to use the 2002 leasehold bill to sunset any new leasehold buildings, this was reneged on then. And this failure to use legislation 22 years ago to resolve the situation means that there's been a further over 2 million properties, leasehold properties, created. The very debt traps that have caused so much misery for so many. So are we just going to allow this bill to pass, knowing that we're creating more leaseholds, more leasehold flats, and therefore more problems, and therefore more debt traps ahead? As Sebastian O'Kelly from Leasehold Knowledge Partnership bluntly put it to MPs, You're out of step with the rest of the world, so stop creating more leaseholds. And that's, I'm delighted to hear the noble Baroness, the Minister, assuring us that nobody wants this. But I just want that promise to be written down rather than just stated. And I want to stress the amendment is not trying to dictate how this should be done. Rather, it gives the elected government of the day, whoever that is, the space and the flexibility to decide on whatever schemes are appropriate to ensure that third-party investors, the rentiers, are no longer permitted in terms of what I hope will be permitted to interfere in what I hope will be a thriving sector of flats throughout the UK. The amendment is not prescriptive, as I said. Commonhold isn't even mentioned directly, even though I agree with all those who've said that it's best suited to deliver the kind of ownership and management of residential flats for the future. But the main point is to set a sunset clause to ensure whichever party is in government, there are no more broken promises, and that the in due course that we heard about earlier has an end date. What's more, the amendment via 3C and 3D even ensures that existing leaseholders are not left behind. And in a way, what's not to like? But it is difficult to know exactly who or what I'm arguing against, because I'm not quite sure that I even understand now why this can't have been done in this piece of legislation, and the answer is not being forthcoming. I just want to look at a couple of objections. In this chamber, the noble Baroness Penn explained from the dispatch box earlier this year that reforming leasehold for flats is, quote, inherently more complicated than for houses, as they required an arrangement to facilitate management of the buildings. Now, surely it's complicated defence is a bit of a red herring. There have been endless consultations, commissions over the decades and decades worth of academic and policy research, as we've heard from the noble Baroness Taylor of Stevenage and as pointed out by Baroness Pinnock. We've had the Law Commission with its 121 recommendations, but also in May 2021, an expert advisory group, the Commonhold Council, was launched by the government precisely to prepare homeowners and prepare the market for widespread uptake of collective form of home ownership. So, as the former Housing Minister Rachel Maclean told the other place, second reading, all the work has already been done. But for remaining complexities, this amendment gives Parliament one more term as a reasonable timeframe to work out any outstanding issues, for example, around the complications of something like shared ownership that we've already heard about earlier. But I also wanted to challenge the notion that the management of blocks of flats is so complicated that it's untenable in the short term. I fear that this hints at a prejudice about what Commonhold, about whether Commonhold will lead to poor property management, something that's often wrongly equated with amateur management, and a flawed argument that I think is sometimes put forward by the freeholder lobby. I think it's patronising and patrician, and in any event, it ignores what is happening worldwide. If you buy a flat in the majority of cities in the world, it will be held in Commonhold, and the buildings are not all falling down or are not neglected. And groups of flat owners are more than capable of bringing in professional management companies to organise repairs. And as the Commons Select Committee pointed out back in 2018-19, they were unconvinced that professional freeholders provide a significantly higher level of service than that which could be provided by leaseholders themselves. I mean, to be honest, it's the opposite. At present, leaseholders are being charged for services that they don't receive. To conclude then, what's not complicated is that homeowners of flats are a safer bet for maintaining and managing their own homes than those who have those developers and freeholders who've given their own profession a bad name, and the reason why this scandal is being discussed in the first place. I suggest that you simply say, in 5 years' time, this will be put to bed and finished with, and then no one can accuse either of the government, whichever government is in power, of breaking promises again.